I'm going to attempt to preach what we just sang there. Some powerful words, right? Powerful words. Excuse my crying mess of a face. So this is the word, part 2, the flesh. We started this series talking about how God reveals himself to us. We said that one of the key points, the whole reason why God reveals himself to us is so that we might believe. Very good. And we talked about how God has revealed himself to us through angels or agents, right? Remember that message? We talked about how God reveals himself to us through creation and this whole world all around us, how God can use dreams and visions, how he spoke through prophets and prophecies to show us that he is God. And last week we talked about the first part of the word, which was the book, and God reveals himself to us through the Holy Scriptures in the Bible. And today we're talking about the other word. We're talking about the word, the flesh. And I'm going to read to you from John chapter 1 through 14. If you want to turn there, you can. It says, in the beginning was the word. Now we know that where it says word in here, that they're talking about Jesus, and that'll come very clear a few sentences later. So it says, in the beginning was the word, and I could say in the beginning was Jesus. And the word, or Jesus, was with God. And the word, or Jesus, was God. He, Jesus, was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, Jesus, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light, Jesus, that gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, children not born of natural descent, nor of human decision, or of a husband's will, but born of God's will. The Word, Jesus, became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. You see, Jesus is the full and complete revelation of God. He is God revealed to us. And we see all of these elements that we talked about God's revelation in his life. We see that Jesus was there at creation. We just read that, right? We see that there were many angels that were present to reveal Jesus to the world, right? We all know about the angels that came to the shepherds, the angels that came to Mary, Joseph. Jesus definitely came with the announcement of angels. We find that many of the prophecies that spoke about the Messiah, that he would be a descendant of David, a root of Jesse, all of these revealed in Jesus's life, even as we read through Isaiah, that he would be pierced for our transgressions, bruised for us. And Joseph had dreams even. We find dreams even in the revelation of God through Jesus. Joseph had dreams, and even Pilate's wife had a dream. The scriptures of Jesus, the time has become fulfilled with his birth, his death, and his resurrection. So here in this moment of our symphony, remember I said God's revelation was like a symphony through time? Here in this moment of the symphony, it seems that all the instruments are playing, right? That it is coming to this stunning crescendo with Jesus and the death of God on the cross. And it seems as though the whole world holds its breath for 3 days before it releases and the symphony begins to play again. The Word became flesh, made its dwelling among us, and we have seen his glory. John writes, we have seen it. It is the divine expression of God, and I ask you, do you see him? You see, God is revealed, but do you see him? Jesus said in John chapter 14, 8 through 11, Philip said to Jesus, he said, Lord, show us the Father, that will be enough for us. And Jesus answered, don't you know me, Philip? Even after I have been with you for such a long time, anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? Don't you believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? The words I say to you, I do not speak on my own authority. Rather, it is the Father living in me, who is doing his work. Believe me when I say to you that I am in the Father and the Father is in me. Or at least, he says, believe in the evidence of the miracles themselves. I ask you, have you seen him? The miracles. Why did Jesus do miracles? You see, this God of the Israelites, they have only really known him through miracles, the God of the Old Testament. You see, he is the God that held the sun still and parted the sea and sent manna and fire from heaven. They have ever really known him as a God who does miracles for their nation. So here we have Jesus. He does miracles as well. He's done big ones like turning water into wine, and he fed thousands of people with a few loaves of bread and a couple of fish. Not once, but twice he does this. And then the winds and the waves, they obey him. You see, the creation, he knows its creator, but by far the numerous of Jesus's miracles, they are small, they are personal. You see, he brings sight to a blind person. He heals a woman with an issue of blood, another with dropsy. You see, he heals women. He touches lepers. He casts evil spirits out of a young boy. And he reaches out to the lonely and the desperate and the isolated. And he touches them. You see, these Jews who had said, don't speak to us face to face, God, for surely you will kill us. We talked about this a couple weeks ago when you talked about how he reveals through prophets. You see, Moses came down from the mountain. There was all of these like majestic, fire and all this stuff. And Moses comes down and they're like, whew, that God's a little too big for me. How about God speaks to you and then you tell us what he said, right? That's the gist of it, right? But this God who they said, don't speak to us face to face. You see, the times of prophets who only speak on God's behalf are over. You see, God is here. He will speak for himself. He will show you for himself. These people now find themselves face to face with this God. And he is this God in a flesh. And I ask you, have you seen him? Hebrews 1 through 11. In the past, God spoke to our ancestors through prophets at many times and in various ways. But in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things and through whom he has made the universe. The Son is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being. You want to talk about a revelation of God. He is the exact representation of the being of God, sustaining all things by his powerful word. And he had provided, after he had provided purifications for sins, meaning his death on the cross, he sat down at the right hand of majesty in heaven. He is the exact representation of God himself. And I ask you, have you seen him? The best way for me to describe this to you, that Jesus is the mold of God. You know, if you want to make an exact representation of something, what do you have to make? You make a mold, and everything that comes out of it is the same. It is God. You see, it is a picture of who God is. Everything that comes out from Jesus and Jesus' life is an exact representation of God. It is his likeness, his being, his thoughts, his heart. It is God's expression of who he is and who he wants to be to you. And who is this Jesus, and what does he look like? He is a friend of sinners, they call him. He comes to the sick people. He comes not to call the righteous, but the sinners. The healthy don't need a doctor, he says. He speaks and he tells the poor that they are blessed. He tells the mourners that they are comforted. He tells the meek, that they will inherit the earth. He says that those that hunger and thirst for righteousness will be filled. He says that those who give mercy, they're the ones who receive it. He says that those who have pure hearts will see God. He says the peacemakers will be called children of God, and those that are persecuted will receive heaven. I ask you, have you seen him? This is the God they didn't want to see. This is the God that they were so afraid of. And this is why so many did not see. But I ask you, do you see him? This mold, the exact representation of God, this pressed in the flesh God as human, Jesus shows us how to be human. He brings compassion to the lowest. He brings dignity to those who are defiled. He brings hope to the hopeless. And I ask you, do you see him? The king will reply, whatever you have done for the least of these brothers of mine, you have done for me. Those that are hungry, those that are thirsty, those that you have fed, those that you have given drink, those that you have cared for. I ask you, do you see him? This is the representation of God. Jesus is mocked. He is beaten. He is pierced, nailed to a cross. He takes the punishment for all sinners. And there is nothing quite like the image of Christ on the cross. If you were going to put a picture, a true picture to the word innocence, we might picture children, but the true picture, the pure innocence is the face of Christ on the cross. If you ask the Jews of Jesus' time to draw a picture of innocence, they probably would have drawn a picture of a lamb, a Passover lamb, a pure, perfect, and it had to be perfect, innocent animal given as a sacrifice, as a representation of how God had saved their families and brought them freedom and saved their homes from death. In Revelations chapter 5, 1 through 6, John saw him. And John describes what he sees. He says, "Then I saw, In the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll with writing on both sides, sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming in a loud voice, "Who is worthy to break the seals and open the scroll?" But no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth could open the scroll or even just peek inside it. And I wept, John says, I wept, and I wept because no one was found who was worthy to open the scroll or look inside. And then one of the elders said to me, "Do not weep. See? Do you see? The Lion of the tribe of Judah? Do you see the Root of David? Do you see he has triumphed? He is able to open the scroll and its 7 seals." And what does John see? Then I saw him, a lamb, looking as if it had been slain, standing at the center of the throne. You see, John saw him. If you have seen me, Jesus says, you have seen the Father. I ask you, have you seen him? Do you see him? Because when you and I truly see Jesus, there is no mistaking God himself. He is the exact representation of God himself. So let us continue to look and to see Jesus. Let us ask God to show him to us. Let us look at him and know that when we see him, God is real. He is the exact revelation of God himself. And as we continue our quest to find ourselves closer to God, the quest to know God, to follow God, and to serve God, we are going to look much more intently at this exact representation of God, this mold that Jesus is. You see, we are called to be disciples, followers of Christ, and when we endeavor to do just that, we ourselves fill up the mold of Christ, and that's what people see. What do they see? God in us. That's what we call being a light in the world. Amen? And so as we move forward in our quest this year, that is the direction that we're headed in looking at this exact representation and this complete and full revelation of God himself, God in the flesh. And so I ask you, have you seen him? And I ask you, do you see him? I'd like you to come up. We're going to take communion, the moment we've been waiting for. If you've seen Jesus, then come. Just come up forward here. We're going to meet right here at the cross again. You know, these words, do you see me, Jesus? Isn't that what he was saying that night with his disciples? You know, you see me as your friend. You see me as a man, a good teacher, a person who does miracles. But then he grabs the bread and he breaks it. And he says, maybe you've seen me, but have you seen me? This is my body. It is broken for you. Have you seen it? Because you will. And I want you to recognize it when you do. And then he took the drink and he similarly did the same thing. He lifted it and he thanked God and he said, "This is a covenant I make with you. Have you seen me? This is my blood I shed for you. Have you seen me? Because when I do this, I want you to see me, God, 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 God on the cross. God giving everything for you because he loves you. Do you see me?" After you take communion, what I'm going to do is I'll take the bread and I'm going to break it, and then we'll just pass it around. And then we'll pass the juice, and you can dip the piece of bread into the juice, and then you could just go ahead and take it. This exact representation of God. It's beautiful. It's incomprehensible. It's such an amazing privilege to take this, to remember what he has done for us. As you look upon the elements today, have you seen him? Have you seen his broken body? Have you seen his blood poured out for you? You're holding it. He has done this for you. And when we partake in this, when we take it, we know he thought of us. He did it for us. Let's go ahead and take it.